Welcome to Josh's House of Nerd Podcast.
Greetings, Nerd Nation. I'm Josh, and I welcome you to the podcast. Grab a cold evergreen gobble of blue milk and make yourself comfortable here at my House of Nerd. Now for tonight's sponsor, Nuttin' Honey. Get it before it's gone. Now, on to the podcast. Today, we are on the topic of the month of March, which is still documentaries. And this month, or week, we are talking about Crit's pick, the 2013 documentary called Sound City, directed by Dave Grohl, that talks about Sound City and the history behind the famous recording studio. Let's talk about that, guys.
Still got to recover. I'm sorry.
What
Best
you got?
sponsor spot ever. And I'm sending John a thing of oil for his chair.
I'm sorry because I was trying to keep it down.
What, you're
Oh man.
you're squeaking?
Yeah, that's why I
It got a little wild there. I was starting to
itself.
wonder if something else was happening there for a minute.
I was moving myself away from the mic so I could laugh because your sponsor was so bad.
I know. I told you it was horrible.
I say leave all this in. It's okay.
Yeah, no, definitely leave it now.
Oh, I warned you. It was bad. Like, this is like the worst one I've come up with. And it was just because I had such
I think
little
it's the
time.
best one.
Thank you.
I think
Yeah,
it's
no,
the
Thank you.
You've got to leave it in now.
Because it's nuttin', honey.
Okay.
All right.
Whew.
Okay, so music.
I'm glad you liked it in a different way. Okay. Guys, I really like this.
Yeah.
This is so up my alley when it comes to stuff, you know. I enjoyed every minute of this documentary. I enjoy him anyway. Dave Grohl is someone I always felt to be quite interesting since the Nirvana days. Anyway, he was always an enigma to me. That, you know, who was this band of Nirvana and stuff. But anyways, I like it that it wasn't. I liked it that it wasn't like really it wasn't really about him. It was about this awesome beat up studio.
Yeah.
They did not make it sound make it look very appetizing to be there. I mean, it looked beat up, man.
I don't think they did much to cut it to make it look that way. I think it was that way.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
I
it was
mean, all
the
the descriptions, everything that you did see, I don't think they were like cutting away and, you know, pose it as anything other than what it was at the time. They showed, you know, old photos, they showed new photos, they showed how it was. Like, I think they did a really good job of pointing out, no, this is what it is. We're not making this up, and we're not exaggerating it for our benefit.
Yeah, they really drove that one home, that this was a pretty wrecked place, especially when they were talking about Rick Springfield and his dog going and taking bites out of the walls, and they're like, "Oh, that's just normal. We're good with that." I'm like, what? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it increases the sound profile. There's a distinct difference in the albums produced after that time period.
You would think that being such a place where so many famous people went, that they would like do something to the place, you know.
So that's
fix it up.
my
I mean, that just
question.
blows my mind.
Where did the money go?
Well,
Good
first,
point.
well, okay. First of all, the glitz and glamour around rock is pretty much only in the advertising. It's not in the actual people. It's not in the gigs. It's not in the places they play outside. Even at arenas, you go backstage at an arena and it's filthy.
Yeah, for
there's
sure.
just, it's hard to keep all that stuff going. And these little, you know, and it wasn't a big studio. Like, it's not like a 20-room studio or something like that out in LA. It's just this little, it's not terribly small, but still, it's, you know, it's basically a warehouse converted. And it's like, all right. Well, actually, it's a factory converted. It's a Vox factory.
Yeah,
converted.
Box Factory. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, like, also a lot of these people that were recording there, I mean, outside of like Tom Petty and stuff like that, weren't, actually, no, I guess their first album was there. So yeah, most of the people that at least started there weren't big enough, you know, to get any other place probably.
Well, they're saying it was Rick Springfield's first album there with
Yeah, I mean, it was Nirvana's first album there, Springfield's first album, Fleetwood Mac with the New Lineup's first album.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you know, those are like the only people that they walk into that place and they all go, it's filthy, but they love the sound of it. They love how that board works, and you know, and to some extent the people that work there. And that's really kind of the point. Music back in the day was made about, you know, around relationships. It was, you know, who you knew, you know, where can you go to get a good sound, where can you go to get, you know, have a good time, and stuff like that, and be in control. And I think for the most part, the owners of the studio, they were pretty much hands off, and they were taking on anybody. You know, they weren't really turning people away. Like the guy said at the beginning of the thing, he's like, you walk in the door and you can pay for the time, you've got it. Like they were not snobs about who they were going to record with. And they invested very early on in that Neve board, which was I mean, that's just a huge chunk of money, you know,
I think
a
it was
huge
amazing,
investment
by
into
the
that.
way. Amazing.
Yeah, I've worked on a Neve board before, long time ago in Dallas, but obviously wasn't the same one. And each one is like handcrafted, so they're all different.
I loved the interview he was doing with Mr. Neve, and the subtitles that appear by his head is like, he knows I'm a high school dropout, right? As he's like explaining the gap between transistors, and
Well,
I cracked
that's
up pretty hard.
a real British engineer
that was
right there.
Pretty well done.
Yeah.
What I was going to bring up is what Crit was talking about, how, you know, it really doesn't, it is important. And they kind of went out of their way at the very end of the documentary to show how important it is to be collaborative and to be there physically on the board, doing everything right there instead of doing it in Pro Tools. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say that I don't agree with them. Like I don't agree with their biggest statement, which is that, you know, you need to have an analog board and with lots of knobs and stuff like that. It's like you need to. They're making an equivalency there that I don't think is true. I think collaboration, they're totally right about. I mean, these are professionals. You know, they know what they're talking about. I don't doubt them in the far. They're like, okay, here's how we've had success. You know, is through this type of collaboration, and this analog state and digital came around. I think some of it is a little bit of a chip on the shoulder from the older people about digital. And I mean, you know, nothing that was in the documentary felt wrong to me. I just couldn't agree with them that you needed, you know, kind of that you need to get in a room together and work through a song and art and everything else like that. Always a great idea. You know, you're trying to build something, you can build it by yourself, whether it's art or any other thing that takes to build. You could possibly build it by yourself, but it's usually always a good idea to at least get a couple of people that you trust to collaborate on it, because the ideas kind of flow around and it changes what the outcome is to something usually much better than what you could have done on your own.
I agree.
So I think they're right about that.
Yeah,
I don't think Pro Tools made music worse. And I think the democratization of music recording is a good thing.
And I didn't get that message coming out of it. I didn't get the sense that they were throwing that under the bus. I think
every time they had Neil Young on, and he was just like, they lost the soul of the music.
That's true.
Yeah, I got that.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But I think maybe it was capped by me or changed because it was, you know, it's Dave Grohl making this, and towards the end where he's talking about what's his name from Nine Inch Nails?
Trent Reznor.
Yeah, Trent Reznor. He's talking about
Ross.
He's talking about Trent Reznor's use of Pro Tools, and you know his keyboard, and he's talking about how it's a tool, and you know he doesn't necessarily need it, but he uses it as a tool, and it makes it better.
Yeah.
To me, that kind of set the term of, okay, digital's not bad. It's, you know, it's when it's used correctly, and when it's used by people in collaboration.
He even said that, you know, he might be more to the analog side, but if anybody was going to make it the digital side more, you know, a good story, you know, to go to digital side, Trent Reznor is the one to do it, because I mean he's done amazing things of creating his own stuff using Pro Tools and stuff, but he's still using, and they make clear in that documentary, he's still using guitars and he's still using pianos and stuff. and whatever tools he needs. But then, it was really cool, like how they were showing him using Pro Tools of how they made his song, and then they threw that one little kind of riff guitar part through Pro Tools to give it kind of that sound. And just
that's not Pro Tools.
What's that?
Yeah, that's not Pro Tools.
Oh, okay.
Pro Tools is just the audio workstation. It's basically a virtual version of the board.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to a degree. So I think the idea is, Trent had a more nuanced approach. Like he was like, hey, digital, analog, it's all just sound making, music making,
Mm-hmm.
use what works. But he also talked about how he put the time in to learn piano, to learn, chord changes and resolutions and music theory. And he goes, I don't think about that stuff when I make my music. I'm not like, thinking that way, but subconsciously I am, subconsciously I know where things are going and stuff like that. And how to get to where I want to go, but I'm not like guiding it because of some music theory type idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think Dave Grohl was kind of talking about that when they kind of gave the impression that it's a shortcut nowadays that a lot of people are taking to use, the purely digital stuff, the auto-tune, and, just pure sampling, that they haven't done or don't do or don't know, that they're taking these shortcuts. And because they lack the music theory, because they lack the learning on real things, that it makes current music not as good unless you have that base. And I think that's the point he was trying to make. And whether or not I agree with that point, I'm not entirely sure.
I was just asked, do you agree?
I'm like I said, I'm not entirely sure. I think there are people that are naturally talented that couldn't tell you, the difference between a chord progression and, heck, what even a chord is. They might be naturally talented to pick things out by ear, or sing by ear.
The guy from the Goo Goo Dolls, he clearly did that. There are definitely artists out there that don't know the music theory. They just know what sounds good and what feels good to them. The guy, I can't remember his name right now, from the Goo Goo Dolls, he was saying that he didn't even hardly know how to play a guitar at the time, let alone write music.
Well, and that's an interesting point. It's like, would you say that musical palette has gotten more sophisticated in the last 50 years? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, because you think about stuff from the 60s or 50s and the complexity there.
Definitely.
At least in popular music or rock
layers
music.
And more, yeah.
Right. So you can make a moving, compelling song without knowing any music theory, even now. You can do that. But in the sea of available music that is here nowadays, I'm not sure you can do that more than once yourself. You may strike lucky once. But here's the thing. Because of the information age, because there is this democratization of knowledge, not just the recording of music itself, but just pure knowledge. You go on YouTube and find tutorials on everything. And if you really are curious to learn, you don't have to go to a school. You don't, learn if you don't want to. You got to know. I mean, there's, 12-year-old kids on YouTube shredding guitars and playing drums like they've been doing it. Yeah, and now those types of skills themselves don't lend to great music per se, but having that knowledge means when they do go to write their album, to be in a band, to write their electronic album or whatever they're trying to do, they have the chops necessary to do it. That's what Trent's talking about. Put the time in, learn the stuff. I just don't I don't think that music's on this hill of gloriousness that requires, kind of there's kind of a love of like not knowing what you're doing and coming up with an amazing song.
Like
right?
they were doing with McCartney, dude. That was amazing.
So I think sorry, go ahead. So I think that's actually something that's wrong in music today, is that the amount of collaboration that a lot of these songs take that become popular and that are good songs, arguably, that collaboration is hidden from the general consumer. They push it onto a single person. They push it on, they came up with a song, they're listed as a songwriter, and they might be only doing it for publicity's sake. You talk about Taylor Swift and the amount of people around her helping her build these songs, but the media portrays it, and the publicists portray it as she's doing her own music, she's doing it all alone, and you see that time and time again, and that collaboration is hidden. And I think that maybe because of that idea, or the collaboration being hidden, means we don't get as much collaboration from a lot of these newer artists. I think that's a damaging thing in current music trends.
And just a counter is almost every song now has a feature. If it's a rap artist or another pop artist or a country artist or whatever else, they're all like, it used to be that, if someone jumps on a track from one band to another band, they would be listed in the liner notes, but it wouldn't be listed in the song. It wouldn't be, by, Aerosmith with, Run DMC, like featuring Run DMC, or the other way around, Run DMC featuring Aerosmith, right? Like they wouldn't do that. They just have the song and then it'd be out on whichever one got to release it. And now almost you look through Spotify's new releases and all of the singles are like, this person featuring this person, this person, this person. Like collaboration is huge in music right now, especially pop music.
They talk.
I don't know if I agree with that though. I don't agree that it's the collaboration they're highlighting. I really think it. I mean, it might be collaboration. You're right. And okay, I don't agree fully. I think in at least 50% of those cases, the featuring songs, I think it's a publicist pushing for these things, just like people getting their names in the front of the credits. They don't want it in the one-liners. They want their client to be listed as the big person. And yeah, these people might have
still collaborated, right?
Yeah.
So
but again,
I
how much do they really actually collaborate?
Well, that's hard to say because how much did they collaborate back in the day? Metallica's famous for only having 2 real writers, and everybody else just had to play what they were supposed to play, regardless of what they wanted to play. That was a really famous thing before, I guess, Reloaded or whatever.
They demonstrated this even with, so they showed Pat Benatar's husband on here, who he's still her guitarist, but he was saying in the early days that he played on a ton of different albums. It was showing Tom Petty playing on the background. They were the background band for another artist,
Johnny Cash.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Which was amazing.
The Heartbreakers playing every instrument for Johnny Cash.
Yeah, I mean, I still believe that there's still collaboration on. This whole thing made me wonder though, what's the collaboration on? Are they made it sound like studios are just non-existent anymore, which I know that isn't true. And how much the engineers or the producers are a part of this, because you always hear about like the famous song from Mutt Lange. Mutt Lange produced this or that or whatever, from AC/DC and
Rick Rubin, who was in the documentary. Exactly,
and you wonder like how much influence they have, and if those people still have the collaboration and the influence. So not only, I believe that if they're still like doing it in that way. Like, I can see a one-off, where someone did it by their own, but I still think that they've got to get these sounds somewhere. They can't all be like in a, somebody's basement most of the time when they're doing these professional studio things. And is there a producer that's behind that's still influencing them, that's still collaborating? And that's where I would say is most likely there's still collaboration going on. And I would agree with you, don't see it, but we haven't seen it for a lot of years. And then it seemed like in the early 80s, you'd start hearing more about the person that produced it. And
well, I think, I bristle a bit when they're talking about, how, modern digital audio workstations like Pro Tools have caused people that shouldn't be in music to be in music. And I'm like, I mean, that's a pretty elitist statement that paints such a wide brush. Yeah, that's not a problem. I mean, if you're like, well, they got... Yeah, they're gatekeeping when they don't need to. I mean, there's no reason for an established person to gatekeep like that. Like they could say, I don't like that music, and that's perfectly fine. They can think that the current music is trash, and I'd be like, all right, that's cool. I mean, if Neil Young doesn't like electronic music, I'm like, all right, that's fine, man. There's tons of people when Neil Young first started who didn't like his music.
True that.
And he still managed to make his mark on
Or
society.
even that punk band Fear that they showed in there.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, Fear. That guy got so old.
We all do.
I mean, it's true, but when he came back on, I was like, that's the same guy?
That's the same guy, man.
And as soon as he opened his mouth, I was like, oh, yep, that's the same
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah, it's an interesting like topic about digitization versus analog and stuff like that. I mean, you saw how much the sound engineer had to do when he had to cut when he was using tape.
That's crazy.
He's like, oh, I have to mark here, and then I have to cut here, and then I have to glue here, tape here, and it's like, and then he went over to Pro Tools and was just like, click, okay, it's done. And it's like, okay, give the professional a quicker way to do something and they can do more things. You get more out of that time because you're paying by the hour. You're paying him by the hour. You're paying the studio time by the hour. Do you really want to pay him to sit down and cut tape unless there's a very specific reason to do so? Okay,
3, 2, 1. All right. For those of you out there that are listening, we just wanted to recognize that we had to record this on 2 separate days, so we might see a little bit of a breakup in the conversation. So just FYI out there. But we're going to continue on with talking about Sound City and stuff. So one of the things that we all wanted to talk about was, we were discussing the bands that they were talking about. We were just talking about kind of collaboration and digital stuff and digital versus audio, which comes up a lot in this.
Well, especially towards the end. I mean,
Yeah.
I felt like they kind of made this focus on why he would go out of his way to get the nav board, and then just we had that conversation about kind of the elitism that creeps in with the advent of Pro Tools and some of these easier ways of getting in, like auto-tune. Especially I think has been just dragged through the mud, and I don't know how much of that is actually deserved and how much of that is just people not very happy with it or happy with earlier alliterations of it. I don't know what you guys are feeling.
It's changed the industry, but I don't. They talk about it more of in a negative light in a lot of ways in this. I don't think it's negative at all.
I've used auto-tune before. It does not fix bad singing. Like if you don't have, if you're not very good at singing, it will not magically make you Mariah Carey. Right? It doesn't do that. It can shift the pitch that you are currently on to something that's closer to true, but it's obviously artificial to most people.
What's interesting about the tools that they can do now, I was literally watching something yesterday about Steve Perry and what he would sound like singing "Don't Stop Believin'" if they had did like a true like a auto tune to the point where it would it just trued up his notes. If they were a little flat, it made them actually a true note. And honestly, that man sounded so good that it barely touched anything he did, and I could barely tell the difference between the one that was tuned and the one that wasn't tuned. I mean, he's so good. And you're right, when they're good, there's not much to do there anyway.
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, they did actually address this in a very small. I can't remember who did it, but they did address this in a really small not really a montage, but kind of talking about the timeline. They're like, okay, it came out of the 70s into the 80s. The 80s started all this processing and everything, every snare hit is a cannon shot. And, they're doing all this processing and they get into the 90s and then into the 90s, you had, kind of a pushback on that. And people were going more analog and analog started coming back around. And they were like, in love with analog and kind of, at least in some genres. And then when it goes into the 2000s, it kind of flipped a little bit over and kind of used both. And it kind of matured in the aspect of like electronic is just another tool they use in trying to figure out as an artist, what do you want your output to sound like? And also, what do you want the person listening to it to feel? And that's just kind of the growth curve of adoption or whatever they call it, where, it's like the bell curve in the middle and then it kind of slumps down and everybody hates it, but then it comes back up to something that everybody just kind of recognizes is there and they just use it.
accepts. Yeah.
Yeah, just use it.
And I think, for one, I think autotune got a bad rep to begin with because its earliest iterations weren't the most fantastic. Like, you could definitely tell when it was being used in some cases, and it just became like this jarring thing. Because if you can tell it's being used or it's overused or overdone, like, it doesn't sound great, and people recognize that. And then people will start to kind of crap on the artist because of it. And so I think the earlier technology, as it goes through its growing pains, can also lead to that negative feeling overall. And then just the propaganda that comes out afterwards too.
Well, yeah, I think autotune is easy for the general public to latch onto. They're like, oh, this covers up people that can't sing, and it's like, oh, but wait a minute, Cher used it. She can actually sing.
So I was just going to mention that when it's used like a tool like she did, like it's an instrument actually, not necessarily.
It's a vocal effect.
Yes.
Yeah. And T-Pain uses it. He can actually do the things that he's talking about, but he uses it for an effect. He uses it as a brand recognition thing. This isn't
himself,
this is like being upset with bands using reverb. It's just why?
How dare they?
Yeah, how dare they? That's not. They weren't actually in a grand hall when they played this. They're probably in some small studio. And it's like, okay, this is, again, they're tools. Now, can you overuse it? Yeah, you can use it incorrectly in some sense. Yeah, you could fail to make an audience feel what you want them to feel by using these techniques. But bad artists should never justify hatred of a technique.
No, I mean,
in my mind,
I think that's where the point they were trying to make when they started talking about Trent Reznor a little bit with Nine Inch Nails.
Right. Yeah, they were trying to say all those are bad except for this one guy. We like him because he's a real artist and he uses it well. Like, I know that's not what they were saying, but that's kind of the way it
still
comes across
records
to me.
analog, but puts it into a digital form, and
exactly. Yeah, it's like this guy understands. He uses it as an instrument. I'm like, everybody uses it as an instrument. They may not use it as well as he does for the people that want to listen to him.
Yeah.
But that's not. That's a weird place to be. I'm not saying that everything that everybody would ever put out is great in its own regards. Like, art has no objective, value to it. But at the same time, like that wide sweeping, like, all this stuff is trash and we gave it away and stuff like that. I'm like, no, that's just old folk talking, man. That's every old folk in every generation talking about the stuff they don't like. That's not like what they grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be derogatory towards the newer people, the people you don't necessarily understand or agree with.
Yeah, and
it's easy to do.
Yeah, and that's I think what it really does, or what it should do, to spin it positively, is allow me to look at the things that annoy me in younger generations and go, I can still be annoyed by it. I don't want to listen to it, but I'm also not saying that it's actually objectively bad.
Right.
I was like, it's not really a value judgment to throw on it.
Yeah. I definitely felt old the other day. I went to go pick up some pizza, and it's a new hip pizza place up in Rexburg, and they're younger and they're playing music in there, and it's new music, and I think it's garbage. And I felt old. I was just like, oh crap, what's going on?
What are these youngsters listening to?
What is this?
This noise.
Like, I can accept hip hop and all that jazz, and it's a genre of music I don't necessarily agree with, but I never actively just hated it. But whatever was playing was garbage to me.
Yeah. I can't wait till the rebelliousness of youth causes polka to be the new punk rock.
Yeah,
that'll be like the ultimate turning point. Yeah, that's true. And in some sense, kind of succeeded. I mean, it didn't make it cool, but made it something kind of countercultural,
more acceptable than it was.
I guess, yeah. At least the accordion.
Yeah, exactly. Talking about some of these stuff, you say it's kind of crap. I it's just, there's some out there that I love and there's some I don't, and there's more I don't than I do. But thankfully, I've had my daughters to kind of like bring me into this century a little bit, with music. But it's still, I think to myself, it doesn't sound like the old schools. When they were talking about, like I was mentioning before, I wanted to talk about Fleetwood Mac. Like when they were talking about Fleetwood Mac and recording that, you listen to the music that they did now on those 24, on the 24 channel mixers that they had, compared to some of these ones now. And I mean, it feels, in some ways, I kind of relate to Dave Grohl when he says it kind of feels a little bit more like the way it should be, more natural, more pure in a sense. And I'm not saying that digital is bad. You're just hearing more of the raw tracks exactly the way that they were made, because they didn't have a way to really like edit it out, the errors as easy.
Yeah, well, they did. They definitely had multi-track recording, so they could edit if they want to.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to is that if you hadn't been told that something was analog versus digital, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. That's my point. It's like, if you've worked in it and you know the techniques involved, you could probably recognize the difference. Yeah, you'll be able to pick up. You might be able to pick it out.
It depends on how you're listening to it too.
True.
Like,
yeah.
Are you listening on hi-fi headphones? Are you listening to it, from speakers? Like, how are you consuming this music? A lot of people. So, for example, the Spotify is launching their hi-fi plan. It's a new tier of streaming. You can, an unofficial plug for Spotify, I guess.
I was going to say, are you getting paid? How would you get one already?
But they've upgraded the quality of streaming for these songs. And somebody put out this article, was like, look, you're probably not going to be able to tell the difference. Don't go for it. Don't fall for it. A lot of people just can't tell the difference, or your hardware is not good enough to really take advantage of it.
Well, or more likely, the setting that you are listening in doesn't lend itself towards, active listening to something of that quality. Because like if you're hearing it, while driving down the road in your car, maybe a high fidelity would work. Maybe it wouldn't. Depends on what type of speakers you have and kind of your setup in your car, I guess.
Yeah.
And also like just the soundproofing of your car from road noise.
But if you're dealing with it at work or something, it's like not a ideal environment for.
Yeah, if I'm wearing headphones at the cabinet shop, with saws going, then the higher hi-fi streaming isn't going to help me any. And or if a convenience store has it piped over their speakers, it's not going to help any. Like you're not going to be able to tell the difference. But if I'm sitting down coding at work, I can tell the difference because there's a hiss, there's a sizzle on the high end. I used to be able to tell a lot more, but as you get older, your higher frequencies become harder and harder to hear.
Yeah,
and I've definitely noticed that. But
I can't even tell.
Yeah, I don't think it's a worthless product. Like I don't think it's a trap. I mean, I guess it depends on what they're going to charge for it. But at the same time, it's like how important is music in your life? Like just actively sitting down and listening to something and doing just that versus just passively listening while you're doing other stuff, washing dishes and, cleaning the house and stuff like that. It's like in that situation, maybe a hi-fi stream probably isn't worth if that's what you're doing, it's probably not worth the price.
Absolutely. So this is like the opposite of a sponsor spot.
Yeah, well, kind of. I mean,
let's mention Spotify and then rag on them for a little bit.
I mean, that's the other thing too. Is like how many people do you know that sit down and actively listen to an album?
Man, it feels like less now than I used to, or than that used to be popular. It just doesn't seem. I don't know.
I remember the days where I would go, through my car and I'd buy an album and I would listen to every song start to finish, and I could tell you every song of a Def Leppard album I listened to, or Bon Jovi, or whoever, and I loved it, But now I pick out. I mean, it's like easy to just pick out one song and you just don't hear it anymore. And I don't know. I feel like that's something that's been lost because there's such enjoyment in that.
It may not be lost, but it also may not be lost. It may be youth. When you have the time to sit down and listen, like dedicate time to an album. That's like fair. As an adult later in life, that becomes much less a thing that you're worried you're trying to do. You're like, hey, maybe if music is so important in your life, you're like, okay, I'm gonna block off like an hour or two Sunday to sit down with an iced tea, lean back in the couch with headphones on, and listen to an album, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, I don't know very many people that actively do that. There's some out there, I'm sure, but it's not the majority.
And to be honest, I partially blame, youth. I think is a good point. That changes, but I also kind of blame the streaming services. To be honest, it's so easy to pick and choose, to build your own playlist, to listen to somebody else's, to take snapshots of an album or one or two. Whereas before, like, you were generally, until the
Well, it's not
advent
an
of digital
LP, but
MP3,
yeah.
you were kind of stuck downloading or getting a CD or getting a tape or something
Yeah.
along those lines, where you didn't necessarily get to always pick and choose. And so, it was even more convenient to do. But with Spotify and Apple and all these other streaming services, it's so easy to pick and choose. And a lot of them have ratings and how many people have listened to this. So a lot of people, I'm sure, just skip past the ones that have low ratings.
Yeah,
And
and
John,
that's
just so
definitely
I'm always looking for the ones that your mom, approves, but I haven't been able to find any lately. What's up with that? Tell her to get on it.
okay. I don't know. I think it was an attempt at a mom joke.
No, it wasn't a mom joke. He always rates his mom, so I'm looking for his mom's rating. Oh,
I got you.
Okay.
If I got to explain the joke, it was a bad joke.
It's still not better, but all right.
Yeah, it's still not great.
Okay, no, but I think this is where I'm the old man, because I still, like, when I see I still check albums, like, not singles.
Same
Right,
here.
so I it's like when I sit down to listen to a new set of music, it's always in an album state, because I like the idea of, like, turning on. I think in the terms of albums, I'm like, oh, I want to listen to that album, not necessarily that set of songs.
I do the exact same thing, and recently too, Weezer's new album just dropped, and I listened to the whole thing.
Yeah, when Clipping's latest album dropped, that was
amazing.
AC/DC's latest one just came out, and I listened to that whole thing and stuff, and it was just more habit. I just had to kind of cruise through it,
Yeah,
and I didn't like everything on it, but it still was a fun enjoyment, sitting,
So yeah, I think, I don't know. I think it's a bunch of people that came out of an industry that doesn't exist in the way that they present it in this documentary. Because this documentary is from 2000,
I'll look it up 1 sec.
13.
I've got it. It's 2013. Yeah,
2013. So almost a decade, right? And
yep,
a lot has changed. Streaming services were not that big in 2013. I mean, there were some and stuff like that. But
yep.
It wasn't the kind of default state.
No, that was the age of MP3 players and downloading from Kazaa. And...
Right. So, like, they were still struggling with and trying to figure out, what the business looked like. Because when you're looking around, you're going, well, I know what the business was before, and it may not have been perfect, but I know how to operate in it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then this new stuff comes along, and technology has basically just demolished that system, and they had to figure. And it took them, probably 6 or 7 years to figure out how to kind of rebuild that system up. And during that time, there's a lot of hurt. Yeah, there's a lot of hurt feelings. There's a lot of hurt and a lot of confusion. And when people are confused, they get scared. And I see a lot of that scaredness in their strong statements about how music used to be versus how music is, the next day. And that's the thing, is I think Dave Grohl has been on both sides of that, right? He's been on the side of, like, the old industry and stuff like that. But I think he's also recognizes that the new systems allow young people more control in the art space that he knows in music. And so, like, it's not definitely one side or the other, but it's interesting because I never really thought of, like, Dave Grohl as an old artist, but he is.
Yeah, he's been through the Napster days. He's been through the,
he saw the height of CD. He saw the height of CD.
Yeah,
I mean, he's got kids.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I saw a little YouTube video of him playing, and his daughter comes up to him and, like, tries to get his attention. He's laughing his head off because he's trying to record this track. She's like, "You promised we'd go swimming."
Right.
And he's like, "I've got to record this. You got to give me a break." It was hilarious, but I loved it because it actually gave me a really instant and clear picture of David Grohl as a father and an individual. Like, just this this not necessarily scripted, absolutely unscripted that I can tell, interaction with his 3-year-old daughter. I was like, oh, that's great. So
Yeah.
he's definitely established. He's not, and I think it reflects in his music a little bit, I guess.
I don't know.
He's confident. He's very
Yeah.
confident in what he does.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Not established as in not innovating or not changing. Just his music is very confident in what he wants to do and what he wants to accomplish.
Yeah. They just released a new album, and I, wasn't a huge fan of it, but it was still it was more of what they always do, so that's fine.
Yeah, it wasn't my absolute favorite. I did appreciate the track commentary they released along with it, though.
I did not hear that.
Yeah, I think I found it on Spotify. You can find it other places, but they did a commentary on every single track.
Gotcha. Okay.
Which was very awesome and unique, and a lot of people don't do that, and it was great.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, another thing streaming services have changed, to kind of little off topic for half a sec, but we don't get commentary tracks on DVDs and stuff anymore.
Especially since they went to Blu-ray.
Yeah, ever since they went to Blu-ray, and then all the streaming services, there's most things don't have commentary tracks anymore, and I miss that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah,
I miss the director commentary and stuff.
Yeah, you can get some of that from studios that recognize like YouTube and stuff like that as a legitimate platform. They'll put stuff out on there. And then that also democratized other people's comment tracks on it. So that's kind of interesting too.
Mm-hmm.
Not that you necessarily want a bunch of strangers who had nothing to do with the production, but those get a lot of views.
Of views, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah. Anyway, I don't know. The technology has changed it a ton, even from when this was recorded, and they were talking about the technology changes. I mean, it seemed like a big, underlying story of the documentary was about kind of the technology changes and what came out of it, and how people felt about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting to see like the up and down of Sound City as a studio. And
oh yeah,
to be honest, go ahead.
I did not. I mean, I have to say, I did not like the song that Paul McCartney and the surviving members of Nirvana put together. Like, I was like, this is not good. Like, I would not enjoy listening to this. I think I'm glad that they got to play with, Paul McCartney, and kind of got to, play with someone who inspired them to get into music with their stuff. But the song itself, I was just like, this is not really my thing. I thought
it was pretty mediocre. There was one thing that I really did enjoy about it, though.
What's that?
I really enjoyed seeing their process of creating it, of starting, just kind of with that little riff that McCartney had. And then it felt like they just kind of, they expanded on that and kind of built it and talked about it. And then they would come up with ideas of, hey, let's try this or that. I was really intrigued by that process. I really wasn't, I also wasn't that keen on the song at the end, but I did enjoy just the whole way, everything that they did with all the surviving members of Nirvana and him, and how they got to the end point, even though I didn't like the end point.
Yeah. If you haven't seen the inside of a studio, and that's a little bit of a weird situation because they're tracking in the studio as they're writing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that can only be done if you own the studio or you're already so established you can pay for that much studio time. Usually most bands that I know of, that process of writing happens, at their practice space somewhere else, or, in someone's house or something like that. It's not done in studio with all that great equipment. It's done, elsewhere. But that process of collaboration and kind of talking through the song and stuff like that, there's, it's a really cool part of it. And it's a cool part of it that actually it's not unique to music. I mean, if you're trying to build something and you're building it with a team, and all the team members, if they don't explicitly trust each other, they at least recognize each other's capability, and you can get some really great stuff out of that. And that has to do with anything you're building. So, and I think that's if you hadn't seen it before, that's a good, like, kind of sneak peek into how, those process, some songs are made. And it's also why some songs sound like other songs. It's just, it's hard to write something truly original. I'm sure, that riff that Paul McCartney had, he's probably been messing around with it for a little while. And it's just kind of one of the things he could, you get that established in the music, and you just kind of, people hand you a guitar and you just start playing stuff. And you're like, yeah, I know this, this is an interesting riff that I was just messing around with the other day. And you just kind of go from there.
Yeah.
And the rest of the people, because they are established musicians and stuff like that, they just, okay, I see what type of thing you're doing. I see where you're going with this. Let's, what if we added this? What if I did this?
And that was the interesting part, is they kind of had their own kind of like shorthand.
Yeah. And you do. It's industry shorthand. If you're talking to somebody and you're setting up, a domain controller at work or whatever, right? You're going to have, you're not going to call everything by its super technical, perfect name, right? You're going to use
call it something a WAP, or you call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You don't. And it's the same with everything else. I mean, you're building with other professionals. I mean, no matter what you were seeing were not a bunch of amateurs sitting around trying to create a song, which is, how Nirvana started.
Yeah.
What you're seeing in the actual documentary is a bunch of professional musicians who know how to make their instrument create sounds and moods because they've been doing it for decades.
Absolutely. I mean, it was good to watch.
Yeah, and that process is always, kind of fun. It's fun to watch competent people do something they're competent at, for sure.
So let me ask you this: of all those songs, so they had, I can't remember everybody, but they had the other one was Stevie Nicks on there. They
yeah, she was doing her song.
Was there any of the songs that stood out to you that you did like that they created with Dave Grohl?
I loved Stevie Nicks's.
I kind of like
Go
Stevie
ahead.
Nicks's as well. That's why I was bringing.
I was better than lukewarm on Stevie Nicks's. I thought it was interesting. I mean, her voice is amazing even as she gets older.
It added like a whole smokiness to it.
Yeah,
like, it was great. And like even the guy's like, wow, this really knows how to sing.
Yeah,
well, I could have told him that. I mean,
and the vamping that Reznor and the guy from Queens of the Stone Age, I can never remember his name.
That was pretty good.
And Dave Grohl were doing as a trio was interesting, but it also was kind of they didn't do a whole lot that I wasn't expecting. So that
Josh Homme, maybe?
Josh Homme, yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, but at the same time, there are three musicians that I really like. Like I like Dave Grohl. I like the way he plays drums, especially. I think his guitar work is pretty interesting, but not really extremely out of the box. But he uses it well. Like he's good at that part of like just coming up with a good melody on the guitar and stuff like that. Josh Homme, his stuff is always interesting. And then of course Reznor is just a master at finding atmosphere. Like he's just really good at that. And although I heard a lot of things that specifically Reznor was doing, because I've probably listened to more of his music than the other two's, because he also puts out more music than the other two. Like I think on like just a number of songs out there, but he's still doing stuff in that documentary that he was playing with at the time, sounds and kind of movements, keyboard movements and stuff like that were stuff he was already playing around with. So it kind of felt very familiar, and also a little like, hey, I'm playing, but I'm also on camera, so we're gonna do something that I know how to do. It's not very experimental, which is fine. This documentary didn't need to do that. That's just what I was thinking while I was watching. I was like, oh, that's a motif he's used many times in many songs. So that's, you kind of see him going back to the comfort zone, because this isn't really an environment with a bunch of cameras on you to get down and like get really dirty with how a song's gonna sound, because you probably only have so much time to record it and only so much time to capture it, and you're just going to stick with what works.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that his repertoire is wide enough that you get a song that isn't just like a GCD standard pop song or a rock song or something like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Well, I mean, overall, I was just, it still kind of blew me away about how much, how many famous people kind of went through that place, and how a lot of, how many careers was creative
Yeah.
in that space.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is, I'm sure that's why Grohl is like really, I mean, not only that, I mean, it started his career as well. And I know that's why it was important to him, but it's just unbelievable. I was just blown away by that whole thing of how many people went through it. And some of my favorite, records of all time. I mean, went through that. I mean, the Fleetwood Mac first one is just one of my favorites of all time.
It is a classic.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of stuff that just kind of blew me away. I had no idea that they were all kind of intertwined at this one dump hole of a studio from the sounds of what they were saying.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I guess that's what kind of shocked me and just made me a little bit starstruck when it comes to that place, and to see how it went from it being so great to how it went down in flames, basically.
Well, yeah, the industry changed,
Yeah.
and I half suspect that the entire point of the documentary was to fund or at least pay back Dave Grohl for him being able to buy the board and set up the studio. It kind of offsets it. It's almost like he didn't have it felt like he didn't have a story that he wanted to tell until he had to pay for the renovation and the board to get it installed. And it was like, wait, what? How can we pay for this? And it's like, well, that's a really cool business idea. It's like, hey, I really want to rescue this. I really want this to be mine and in my studio and stuff like that. And there's a big history here. And if there's a history here, there's a story here. If there's a story here, let's tell that story. And
I loved the transition in the documentary. It felt natural, it felt smooth, and it kind of gave you this it felt spontaneous but yet right. If I'm trying to think of a good way of putting it, it was like you didn't see it coming. I don't think like you didn't see this turning into a collab album that Grohl's putting together with the Nev board, because it's just talking about Sound City and the build up and all that jazz, and it kind of focuses on the board a little bit, then it goes back. But once it transitions into this, well, we did something about this, granted, maybe it was backwards, like you said, they got the board first and had to figure out how to pay for it. But the documentary illustrated it in such a way that it was just like, this is the logical and right and good feeling continuation of Sound City. And like, we are staying true to it. We are bringing it, to the forefront and just kind of reminding people why it's important and how it's important, and just how he chose to do that, I think was fantastic in the transition. It didn't jar me.
I think that it'd be interesting to know if they're paying it forward, if they're opening up the studio for all these different younger bands to come in and do their thing. They didn't really say anything about it. I think some of the bands that were playing over the end credits were kind of that, maybe. But it's like, okay, you really want to represent like what Sound Studio was. You got to give every artist a chance to record in there, because that's what made Sound Studio. I mean, the Nave board was important as a piece of equipment. But what most of the documentary was about was not the piece of equipment. It was about the stories of the people that went there and the kind of the albums they made and the art they made while they were there. Now, I don't think Dave would be very happy with a bunch of people pissing in the corner, like they did at Sound City. But yeah.
No, it sounded like Wild West, definitely there.
Yeah.
From what I'm looking at right now on Studio 606, I'm seeing 243 entries in their produced discography, either whether that's full albums. It looks like it's a mix of full albums and singles, and they're still active up till at least 2017 is the last time I've seen it. So it seems like and a lot of some of these bands, I have no idea who the crap they are. So
well, that makes sense.
Means hopefully it means they're paying it forward. And
it sounds like at least putting it to use. It wasn't just used for Dave Grohl.
The documentary.
Yeah. Documentary, do the album, and then that's just where he's going to record it, Foo Fighter songs or something.
Yeah.
Which honestly, I thought that maybe that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they didn't really talk about it. They didn't talk about what its future was. So
No. Even though
he just talked about rescuing the board, which was, all good and everything. But like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
A rescued instrument that's put in a case, in my opinion, isn't rescued. It's just put in a case.
Yeah.
If you got to get it out there, you got to use it to do something with. But it sounds like they did, so that's great.
Yeah, it looks like actually they're still active in 2020. Mr. Bungle and Lamb of God recorded in 2020.
Lamb of God, really?
Yeah.
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 Wow.
Okay.
An actual album.
I haven't heard from
Ozorn.
those guys
I've
for
never
a
heard of Ozorn.
while.
These are weird. Weird band names.
Most bands are like, they're like starting a business. Most of them fail very, very early. So
Yeah.
it's not
Unheard of just to have like these random names and
no,
not have any idea.
It's actually I promise you, Sound City recorded probably 1,000, bands that no one will ever hear of, ever heard of or ever hear of, because they just existed long enough for that to happen, and it's really, really unlikely that they're, that
they got
anything
airplay
just
or
because you're
anything.
recorded there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what you're seeing is survivor bias, right? It's like, oh, that studio must have been great. Look at all these hits they had. And it's like, yeah, that was probably an extreme minority of the stuff that was recorded there.
Yeah, absolutely. They had to pay the bills.
Yeah, I mean that's how you do it. It was a business. Yeah.
Gotta take the good with the bad because it all still
No,
pays the bills.
Considering, I wonder how well that business was run, considering the fact they did not transition well, in that first hit of digital age where they just kind of dropped off the face of the earth until analog kind of came back. I wonder how well it was managed.
You know what
that
it
they
felt
didn't
like
make
in
that
the
transition.
documentary? It felt like the transition went horrible because one of their main people broke off and did their own because it felt like their own studio, his old studio, didn't want to transition.
They were definitely walking around eggshells on that.
Yeah.
Well, they had what do you do? All your competitors have gone digital, and the ones that didn't go digital are getting bought out by your competitors that are gone digital. So you go, oh crap, we need to go digital, and then you're trying to retrofit, which is extremely expensive to do.
Mm-hmm.
Even they would have to have like a major war chest of funds to be able to sit this out, and a crazy amount of foreknowledge to not have tried to respond and buy equipment and go digital themselves, to just stay analog. They didn't. They even talked about it. They're like, oh, the guy over there, he had like 4 faders, but he had like 96 tracks because whatever, and he was doing all this recording on digital. And Sound City did try to do that. They tried to go that way, but that's they didn't know how to be that type of studio. They knew what worked for them previously, and it's a, I mean, that's what capitalism does. It rewards risk, and it also punishes. Well, it usually punishes risk. If nobody steps in. So, they tried, they didn't do it well, and they failed. That happens. There's not much you can do about that. You have to have a crystal ball to be able to avoid it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you got to tell all your people that you're borrowing money from, no, trust me, analog's going to come back, and we're going to be important again. Like, how long? A decade? 15 years? No one's paying the rent for 15 years with no, payback. There.
Yeah, especially in California.
Yeah.
That couldn't have made it
I mean,
easier.
at that point in time, the board is worth more than the building. So you're selling off assets at that point. So yeah.
Which again,
I wonder how much he spent on that board.
Oh God, I don't know.
Like how much he bought it from them for? Like
I don't know.
Yeah, wow.
I mean, they're handmade. Each one is unique. I mean, it's like,
but
it's
to counter
basically
that they said they were going to throw it in the garbage if he didn't buy it.
I don't remember that part.
They were just going to get rid of it, they said.
Yeah, they were going to get rid of it, but getting rid of it probably meant auctioning it. You're not taking
Yeah.
something like that and throwing it out the door.
Okay,
It has value, even if that value is in a museum.
Yeah. Well, in an interview, he said he would pay up to $1 million for it. So
Right.
who knows how much he actually paid? Because I'm not finding any information.
Yeah, they're probably not going to disclose that to anybody.
Yeah.
And I don't know, who did he pay it to?
That's true.
They almost made in the documentary, and it almost felt like it was the original guy who bought it. But I don't know if that's true or not, because they showed him at the very end,
Yeah,
discussing
I
it.
don't think they made that clear.
No, they did not. They did not make that clear at all.
That's okay. I mean, that's just something to wonder about.
Yeah.
It's not really what the documentary was about.
No.
Well, cool.
Oh, there's my chair again.
Yep.
Well, have we said everything that we wanted to say about this one?
Yep, I'm golden.
I feel like we're winding
Yeah,
down.
I was
here
glad to
a
get to
little bit.
watch it again.
I very much enjoyed this. This is stuff I really enjoy anyway, and I'm surprised I hadn't heard of it, and I was pleased to see it and enjoy it as much as I did.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah, I really did. That's my kind of music anyway. I mean,
Yeah,
you know.
I enjoyed that week because I watched every other recommendation on Crit's Watch and watched The Inventor. The Inventor was phenomenal.
Isn't that great? Yeah.
Oh man.
It's fascinating.
And to learn later that she's most likely faking her deep voice too.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
it's amazing.
It's so
Amazing.
cringy because you know what's going to
Yes, it
happen.
is.
Everything she's saying is so like just inwardly cringy because you're like, man, she doesn't mean a jack word of it. Like she's just.
We're gonna risk reviewing that. So like, yeah, we probably
I mean, it sounds like I need to watch this.
you should. You absolutely should. Because
I mean, honestly, I was planning on it anyway. And stuff.
It's good. Yeah. It's very good.
Well, cool. Let's go into the ratings, guys. Crit, it was yours. So let's start with you, bud.
All right. I will give this a 8 out of 11.
8 out. Very cool.
Because it goes up to 11.
Goes to 11.
I'd watch this with my mom because she probably grew up with a lot of this music.
Yeah.
Well, never mind. She grew up in like the 30s, so you know.
Oh God.
Jeez.
She's gonna beat
I don't
the
think she
crap out of you
listens
for
yet.
that one.
Yeah, I was going to say. Oh my gosh.
If I said that, I could hear my mom just like already like driving over here to kick my butt. I mean,
Right.
She probably grew up with the early bands that were recorded by Sound City. So
yeah. I gave this a 9 out of 10. Needles in the butt, and I would watch it again.
All right.
where did you get needles in the butt?
I honestly don't know. I can't remember.
Is that
It's
from
one
the
of the-
steroid one?
That's,
Didn't change it.
I think you didn't change it, man. I think it's from the steroid one.
I thought I'd change it, then I just read it and I just went, wait, did I not change
well,
that? I
there were-
didn't change it.
in your
Here's
in
the
your
funny thing. I
defense.
changed the rating, but I didn't change the part after it.
Right.
You got to
In your
understand,
defense-
last week I was a little flustered with pulling this together with everything I had going on.
No, that's cool. In your defense, there probably were needles in the butt at that place. So
Probably.
Yeah, there was
there was definitely drug
probably
use.
drug
So
use. Yeah.
yeah.
Thankfully,
They
that's the
didn't
only
say
thing
it
I
in
did.
so many words.
Well, that just made it funnier. Okay, let's get on to next month because we're on our new month, guys.
All right.
And I get to pick this month, and I already dropped to Crit
Yeah.
what this
Yeah,
was
that's right.
when we're on Thursday. So we're starting with a new topic, and the new topic for the next month, don't kill me, John, rom-coms.
Oh no!
I knew it! Yes!
No.
I'm so happy at your suffering. It's great.
I knew it.
No.
I told Crit, I'm like, you think John's going to kill me?
You'll be fine, man. It's a wide
rom-coms.
it's a wide genre. I'm sure you can find.
And I
something.
picked
Yeah.
some good ones.
I guess technically Happy Gilmore is a rom-com.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. There is so many things that like can be considered a rom-com. It was a little
Marley
open.
and Me.
Huh? Marley and Me. We need to talk about this at the end of this one, by the way.
Yeah, at the end of this one. Yeah.
So I will give you my 3 picks on this.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
And number 1, this movie will get you warm and sweaty. Number 2,
Dancing.
you have to check out what this movie has to deliver. Number 3, love found via the information highway.
You've Got Mails, maybe the third one. I don't want the third one.
No, I think that's the second one.
Is the first one Dirty Dancing? Is that even a
We're not
comedy?
supposed- we're supposed to- I don't think we're supposed to guess.
I want
I'm
to
gonna
guess.
shut
I
you
want
down
to
and
avoid
say,
a minefield
I
here.
can't believe that you didn't know that Dirty Dancing is not a rom-com, dang it.
It's not. Well, I guess it isn't a comedy. Yeah.
No, it's
what are you
complete
leaning-
drama.
Yeah.
What are you leaning towards, Crit? They all kind of hurt to me.
I can tell you, I'll tell
you.
you one thing. I know Crit likes one of these, like a lot.
Oh. When have we talked about rom-coms? Now I'm not thinking about the choices. I'm trying to remember what ones we talked about. All right.
One's kind of a border of a rom-com. How about that?
Okay.
Let's find the border one. I like the border idea.
You're counting on me to guess which one's the border one. I don't think that's gonna work. All right. I'm leaning towards number 3.
All right. As long as it's not You've Got Mail.
No, You Got Mail's number 2.
I guessed right on You Got Mail. Yes.
All right, good.
Number 1 is one of my favorites. It's this movie will get you warm and sweaty, which is Fever Pitch, with Drew Barrymore and Jimmy Fallon.
I don't
good.
think I've ever seen that one.
I don't like Jimmy Fallon, so I'm glad we missed that one.
It's a great movie. You might not like
That's
Jimmy
probably
Fallon, but
fine.
I thought this overall story is pretty good, and I just love Drew Barrymore a lot.
Yeah.
Love found via the information highway is Her.
Okay. I can be okay with that one.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That was the one I was kind of aiming you guys to. I was hoping you'd pick 1 or 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
did enjoy Her.
I didn't get any of those hints at all. So I'm glad.
Yeah, I mean, warm and sweaty with Fever Pitch, you know.
Yeah. No, I get that. I'm just
Okay.
saying, like, if you were dropping hints on which one to go towards.
Oh no, I wasn't.
picking
I
that up.
was hoping
Yeah.
you guys would pick those ones.
So now I have to come up with rom-coms. I'm just going to find the worst rom-coms.
Oh,
Remember,
is that
you
what you're
have
going
to
to do
watch
to
it.
punish us? Is that what you're doing? To punish me?
Yeah, but he still has to watch it himself.
That's true.
And he and that's the thing.
I'll cliff notes that one.
And that's the thing. He can't know if we won't enjoy it or not.
That's true.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
you-
true.
you-
That would be the
you-
worst if I pick a
Yeah.
horrible one and you absolutely love it. That would be the
And we're
worst.
just like, oh, this is great. You're the only one to suffer.
I picked this knowing that you would go, oh, John, but at the same time, I had a lot of people here at this house wanting this one. So I had special requests coming out of this one.
Well, John, you're picking the next month, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can
Yeah,
get back at
so-
us for that one. At me for that.
What's this us thing? I didn't pick yours.
Yeah, get back at Crit
Yeah,
for
because you
picking
noticed-
mine.
Throwing Crit under the bus here.
It's like, come on now. I'm
Sorry,
Swiss.
Crit.
Well, never
You're
mind.
Switzerland?
All right. No.
Oh. Well, gentlemen, this was a little bit of a rough podcast, splitting it up between 2 different times, but I appreciate you both. And as always, to all you out there, may you be excellent to each other and live long and prosper from all of us here at Josh's House of Nerd. Thank you and good night.
Thanks for watching. For more nerdy awesomeness, please like and subscribe and check out our other nerdy videos.